afternoon and welcome to this month's episode of the Self-Build Hour. My name is Alan Corfield and I'm today's host. Stepping in for our usual host, Jenny Chandela, who is our guest this week, our guest speaker. For those who are joining for the first time, the Self-Build Hour is our monthly webinar series and it is recorded live. And the benefit of joining us live today is that you can ask questions, and if you've got the chat function or the Q&A function, I'd advise you to do that throughout the talk, and we will get time at the very end of today's speaker's presentation to answer those questions and put those questions to Jenny. We then edit it and it goes up on our website with all the previous Self-Build Hours that we've done. And the reason that we set up the Self-Build Hour in the first place was so that people could get access to expert speakers and expert presentations like the stuff that they get at the home building shows, but it could be done on their time, a time to suit you, and from the comfort of your own home or your office or wherever you're joining us from today. And I welcome you and thank you for being here live or, as I say, watching it at a later date. So today's speaker is Jenny Chandela, and she is a US registered architect, and she fronts up AC Architects' efforts in the South, and she's based at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre in Swindon, which, if you've not been to it, is a must-have for any self-build or renovator. Jenny often speaks at home building and renovating shows and speaks at most of the events that are held at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre. She is a very talented architect and takes clients right the way through the whole project. And today's topic is on how to formulate the perfect self-build brief, which is where we must start. It's a really good place to start, right? We're at the start of or 3 months into the year. Lots of people are thinking about their projects and getting started. And I think this is a really good place for today's speaker to take over and take us through today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Alan. Well, as Alan mentioned, I'm usually on the other side of the camera. So or not the other side of the camera, but doing the hosting. So let me just share my slide. And can you see that all right, Alan?
Yep, see that? That's perfect, Jenny.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here doing the presenting rather than the typical host position. So thank you very much for having me. As Alan mentioned, I'm going to be really talking about how to set up your brief and why this is important. This is the brief is the thing that really sets the foundation for the entire project from start all the way to finish. It's something you can be working on now, but some people don't know exactly what to include in a brief. So, it seems really obvious to Alan and I and other team members who work on these all the time. But if you're just starting out on your first project, you may not really know where to start with it. So first of all, we're just going to talk about what is a self-build brief and what to include in it beyond just rooms, which are really important, and we will talk about that. But how is your brief differentiated from another person's brief? And that really comes down to needs, lifestyle, short-term and long-term living requirements. And also for us, of course, I think it's essential to be thinking about your energy goals, and it has to absolutely align to the budget. And finally, a lot of it comes down to communication all around between you and your design team, between your design team and you, and then later on your construction team. So I'll talk a bit about how to communicate that vision. So starting off, what is a self-build brief? It really is that roadmap, and it explains to your design team who you are, how you live, what you need, and what are your values for that self-build and for that project. So it's going to do things like setting an appropriate project tone and really establishing that vision for you. If it's done well, it will also reduce costs because it's going to keep everyone focused on what the real important components of your project are. It as I just said a few moments ago, it makes the design for you and for your lifestyle. And it keeps all household members focused on agreed priorities. And we see that a lot, that one person in the household will come with a certain set of priorities and another will come with a different set of priorities. And as architects, we do spend some time trying to tease those apart. And if you can have those teased apart, at least partly before we get to us, that's really helpful. So just like you wouldn't start cooking a complex meal without a recipe, you wouldn't start building without a brief. So this is going to be the single most document you'll create before any of your work begins. And really, to get this right, there are going to be benefits to it, and those benefits are going to be sort of the equal and opposite to the difficulties and stresses that it eliminates. So it really is about taking your dream and giving it a real firm direction, investing the time right now to really think about what it is that you're trying to achieve in this build, and committing to those changes. So it's going to provide clear design direction, less back and forth and redesigns. I'll say several times throughout this presentation, I'm sure that architects aren't mind readers. So we need that good roadmap as much as you do. It's going to give us better budget control because suddenly your design team will be able to balance your request with what the budget says that we can achieve, and just fewer surprises on site. And the contrary is sort of everything opposite to that we don't start getting scope creep and oh, well, as long as we're doing this, we're just going to do it once, so we might as well add in this, that, and the other. It gives everyone some accountability and a document to reference back to and ask about that. So who you're briefing. So you're briefing your project team. So your design team is absolutely going to be an architect or a designer and a structural engineer. The other sort of consultants or services listed in 3 through 8 are all really, really valuable components and necessary components of your design and design team, but you might not have a specific consultant for those. You might have a specific consultant, but for example, planning consultant, your architect may be putting together the planning package if it's appropriate scope for them to take that on without a planning consultant. You may be doing the quantity surveying, that's the costing and the project management. The heating engineering may be done by a subcontractor who's providing the proposal for your heating system. So all these individual items are required, but you may be doing them as the self-builder, or other members of your design team may be assisting with them, or you might have a standalone consultant for them. So the brief isn't just for you. It is really the instruction manual for your entire professional team, and your brief is going to speak to all of them in order to provide that same equal starting point. So a really important component that I think often gets lost when people start to think about their brief is thinking about needs and lifestyle. It's sort of an intangible when you think about it, but it has really, really tangible effects. So you start off by having really honest conversations. Don't just assume your partner or your children or another relative who will be living with you is on the same page as you. Let's all sit down together, kids, partners, as I said, regular guests. So maybe this is someone who's going to be moving into the house at some point for multi-generational living. Maybe you have care needs either for younger children or on the opposite end of the spectrum, and you'll have someone in the house regularly needing to benefit from the use of that space. Write everything down, discuss your differences, and set those priorities in terms of what do you absolutely have to have, what's a non-negotiable, and what are the things that are nice to have. And setting those priorities early gives you a really good benchmark for when you're trying to consider cost savings and whatnot. We'll talk more about that in a second. But one of the things you could do is set up one of the rooms, a dining room or a home office, and use a post-it note method. So you have a post-it pad in the room, and whenever everyone gets a wall, and whenever they think of something that they need or they hate or not in a million years or have to have, it's put on the wall, on their wall, or their space within that space, so that you start to categorize those. And it doesn't have to be an overwhelming, sit down and figure it all at once. It can happen and evolve over time. And then you can stop and look at it at some point and see where are the overlaps, where are the divergences. So think of something that works for you, that's manageable for you. And think across time. So we're all really good about saying what we need now. How do we use our house today? What does day-to-day life look like? But most self-builders who go into this don't go into it with the intent of doing it again. There are some self-builders who do it, particularly if they start earlier on. But most self-builders do it as their forever home. So let's think about it forever. What are the needs in 5 years from now? What are the needs in 10 years from now? And what are the potential needs even later than that? So you may have new people coming into your household, or you may have current household members leaving the household. You may have the next generation of grandchildren coming into the home, and suddenly you'll be taking on a caring responsibility for them in some of those early years. So what you may even think of, one of the things I talk about a lot is you never know when you're gonna have a sports injury. Even if you're very young and able now, you may fall down and break a leg, or be playing a sport and break a leg or an ankle, and you need to be able to have showering facilities and somewhere to sleep on the ground floor, even if it's for a temporary standpoint. So think about those sort of functional needs, but also think about the infrastructure needs, and think about potential future proofing for your energy strategy. So, maybe right now you can't afford the solar panels and the battery system, but you could put the wiring in for them. And that's much easier to do now than it will be down the road. So these are the types of things that you can think of, both in terms of what are the functional needs, but what are the future proofing needs. Okay, think about where you've lived in the past, where you're living now. So your history of everyone has lived in a house and knows what they like and they don't like and what really annoys them. But we don't know, as your design team, what your experiences have been. So try and capture those. Tell us what you've loved and hated in those past experiences. Tell us what has been missing and really, difficult to live without in terms of the functionality of the space, and where are the friction points in the layouts that you've lived in, or on the converse, what has really surprised you that's made the space just function so much better than you thought it would. Common wish list items would be natural light, storage. We all know that most of the houses we've lived in have prioritized the primary living space above storage, so we don't have place to put our things that we all inevitably have. Warmth is another one that some of us have not experienced in a home, and then certainly privacy. Are there certain areas of the house or the garden that are really important that you have privacy? And most people I speak to really want that connection to the garden. We might not have a majority of the year where we feel like we can really open up the doors and live house to garden. But on those days where we can, most of us really, really look forward to that and want to maximize it as much as possible. So what are your wish list items, or what are your must-haves? And then also think about what are your top 5 activities that you do in and around the house. So what are you doing 80% of the time? And these are sort of within the categories of social and family. So cooking, dining, entertaining, gaming. Then there's also productivity and passion. So do you have to work from home? Might you actually have to work from home at a certain point? Do you have hobbies that require certain amounts of natural light or special finishes on the floors? Because of mess or something else. Acoustic separation. If you are a musician, maybe your partner doesn't always want to hear it. So let's think about those things as well as just the functional components. And then support in outdoors. If you're really outdoorsy or you have dogs that come back super muddy, we often come into the house and say, oh, I don't have anywhere to put this muddy stuff. I don't want to bring it in the house, but I don't have a place outside to store it. So let's talk through. You don't need to come up with the solutions, but identify what the needs are and what the desires are to come out of that spaces. So these 5 activities that you're listing, they could help define some of the spatial priorities, necessary room sizes, orientations, and even some sort of utility connections. So I've talked to you a few times about setting priorities. So I think we can categorize these into 3 sort of bands, and that's the must-haves. So the things you absolutely have to have in the house. These often have to do with number of bedrooms and how the house itself flows, as well as energy concerns and some of those specialist requirements that make your project different from someone else's project. And then we have another category that is really you would really like to have it, and it would affect the way you live in the house day to day. But if budget was pushing, you could put those aside for the time being. And then finally, the dream. So if the budget allows, if everything goes really, really smoothly, and or we've been waiting for a pocket of money to become available, and it does come available, what would we bring back into the project? So examples are listed below, but for all of you, it's going to be completely different. Budget pressure is going to come along the road. So it is really important to have these things documented so that you don't have to go at it with the emotional sensibility that might otherwise be attached to it. You can be a bit more impartial and say, look, we all agreed what the priorities are. We now have a budget pinch. We put this thing in dream. It's not at all necessary. Let's take it out. Or we put something in wood love, but actually we could accommodate that if we're creative by having a dual use room. And these priorities may change throughout the project. So it's really important, I think, at each design stage to check in with those priorities. Once again, with the full group of household members that you were meeting with, and say, do these priorities still match, or have we changed what the priorities are slightly because of life circumstances or because of additional research and education we've done for ourselves. So be aware that the brief is a living document and it can be changed. It shouldn't be changed radically, but tweaks, in terms of priorities, will change, and that's totally normal. So something really, really important to myself and to ACA in general are setting those low energy goals. Most self-builders who are going into it, one of the big priorities for you is going to be related to having a house that's warm, having a house that doesn't cost a lot to run. So we need to be able to talk about what those low energy goals and the appropriate budget alignment. And when I say budget alignment, I'm not just talking with the low energy goals. I'm also talking in general, because your budget should form part of your brief. It's absolutely necessary. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So really, low energy isn't a feature that we add later. have people come to me at the center quite a bit and say, we've got these drawings that have come through planning. We've now done a bit more research on Passive House, and we want them to be developed as Passive House. That may or may not be possible. Early design decisions make such a key, take such a key role in the future sort of ability to execute your design low energy. You know, from the get-go, we're looking at fabric first, and we're just looking at simple design 101 type features about where it sits on the site. Where are you getting the benefit of solar orientation and natural heating? Where are you possibly getting too much of that? Where are your prevailing winds? These are all really simple things to do at early design stages, but more difficult to deal with once you get past planning and once you get even further on. Definitely. And this is something that's harder to change about the design after you've built something. So, you know, we always say to get that fabric right as, you know, as a starting point, as an initial spend in your budget, it's a really important way to get the functionality and the performance out of the build. So define your target standard. So you might be aiming for full Passive House certification or EnerPhit if it's a renovation project, or you may be saying, you know what, I just want to follow fabric first principles. I want to have better than building regs, and if I got an A SAP rating, I'd be really, really pleased with that. So be honest about it, and for everyone, it's very different. But then also, what is, you know, that's sort of the low energy side of things, but there's also the sustainability side of things. And a lot of people have particular low carbon goals in terms of the materials used within the build. So those can be two separate conversations, actually. There's very rarely the perfect solution that deals with all of them, but we can help you get as close as we can with you know, the reality of budget and brief and the plot itself. You know, I just mentioned this fabric first approach, prioritize the building envelope, the insulation, the airtightness, any thermal bridges, so that you're reducing the demand on your systems before you even introduce the systems and the technology. And that will have a trickle down in terms of your renewables, what you need, how much of those things you need, and finally, you that future proofing and carbon goals. So think about how far in the spectrum you want to get in terms of sustainability and positive or net zero energy bills. And that's something I should say your design team hopefully can help consult you on as well if you're a bit feel a bit lost in that. So spaces and rooms, this is important. I know we haven't talked about it, but I think it's a thing that most people sort of understand when they sit down to write a brief. They can understand, well, I need certain rooms. These are the rooms, and I can write a list of those rooms. But what I would say is, it is important for you to tell me, you know, I want an open plan living room, I want a bed one with ensuite and dressing room and 2 additional bedrooms. And it's really important for you to give me an idea of how big those rooms could be or what they need to be able to accommodate. Because your idea of a large bed one suite is going to be probably different from what my idea is. So if we can try and quantify that as a starting point, you know, no smaller than, or, you know, this dimension is my ideal. Those are really important pieces of information for me to have. I might go back and I might say, you know what, it doesn't quite fit within the space that we're trying to create, but I think we can still accommodate what you're trying to accommodate in a slightly different set of dimensions. But then also the quality. So some people, sticking with the bedroom as an example, some people really want to be flooded with natural light in the morning. Other people want the bedroom as dark and as cozy and quiet for as long as possible. Everyone's individual in that. So think about those types of things. I've also talked quite a bit already about what you have to have and what your wish list is. Make sure you're thinking about those within the spaces and rooms. Do you need 2 independent offices, or could you have 1 work from home office and 1 room that is an office / spare bedroom, or an office / snug that doesn't need the snug function during the day potentially, but at night it can be a snug. Think about zonings and adjacencies. You can do a simple bubble diagram for this and say, well, when I'm waking up in the morning, I like to make my cup of coffee or tea, and then I like to go sit on the terrace, doesn't matter what the temperature is, and catch up on news or read a book or whatever it is, and then I come back inside, and that's when I really get started with my day. So map out sort of the way you use spaces, or what things absolutely have to have a hard separation between them. I often have clients who like the idea of open plan living, want to have the living room, the kitchen, and the dining room all sort of open up to each other if they can. But likewise, they sometimes want to be able to have a feeling of separation. So a big rectangle wouldn't work for them, but an L shape might. So there are different ways of zoning things that can give us that flexibility of spaces as well. So what can you afford? So it's really important to be honest and straightforward about this. Whilst you're going out and putting together your project budget, you should also be your project brief, you should also be putting together your project budget. So maybe this you're lucky in that you can do this from savings you've accrued. Maybe it's going to be a combination of savings and sale of a house, which can be a bit of an unknown, and future financing. Maybe it is savings and sale of a house, but you need some bridging finance while you're before you sell that house. So if you need any component of financing, or you think you might, go talk to a specialist finance person like BuildStore. Will give you really good advice on what is realistic that you can afford, and really set that budget first thing. What needs to be included in the budget is everything. So the plot price, the professional fees, the build cost, contingencies are really important, and any borrowing fees that might be required throughout that design and build process. So the things that are going to impact the cost of the plot, the cost of the build, even the cost of the professional fees, is going to be the location of the plot and the house and the development, the size, the complexity of planning permission, and utility connections. So and I probably should have also mentioned on here the landscape. So is it a very sloping site? Is it a site that potentially floods? All these things can have influence on that budget. The cost of the plot may go down as a result of some of those complexities, but then the cost of the build may go up, and it will be probably vice versa for the simplicity of a plot to develop. If the cost of it will be a bit higher, and then your professional fees may be a bit lower, and your build costs may be a bit lower. So depending on the type of plot and its risk level, the plot price typically is going to range anywhere from the very low end at 50K. Although if you do find a plot for that cost, I would really research to make sure it is a suitable self-build plot, all the way up to 250K. But then, if you're sitting in the south of England, you're probably going to be looking at plots that are higher value than that. So, sometimes people decide to build a house, if they're not dependent on a specific location for various reasons, they might decide that they want to live somewhere that has lower plot prices so that they can spend more on the build than on the house. But really, your architect and design team need to know what the real number is so that we know what the target is that we're designing to. Once again, we're not mind readers. If you come to me and tell me, well, I don't really know what the cost is, and you say you want a project of this size, your plot has a certain complexity level, and I say to you, well, I expect it to cost this amount of money on average, take that as, we've got some experience, and think about it and say, okay, well, is that really something I can afford to do? Because you don't want to have the heartache later and get this design that you've fallen in love with and realize that you can't actually design anything. It's a waste of your time, it's a waste of your money, and it does cause heartache. Also, be really realistic about contingencies that you will need. So for these early budgeting exercises, you should expect professional fees to be somewhere in the range of 10 to 15%. When I say professional fees, I'm talking about architect's fees, structural engineering, planning, application costs, topographical surveys. There's a big lump of that, but there's a range because depending on the particular plot, you might need different sets of professional input. And then starting contingency of at least 10%. But if it's a complex site, you should be looking at more than that. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is just plot and site considerations. If you've already put together your brief and thought about what it is you need, that's going to help you better evaluate the actual plots that you're seeing and whether they'll work for you. So for example, if you said that you wanted to have a bungalow and live all on a single story, you should consider that your construction costs as a per square meter costs are going to be higher because you've got more envelope, more roof, more slab than you would in a similarly sized 2-story or a story and a half house. But additionally, you need the plot to be able to develop that. So if you're looking at plots that are, are narrow urban infill plots, or an infill plot within a village that's relatively narrow, you're probably not going to get the large bungalow footprint. You might get a small bungalow footprint, but not a large one. So these will help you sort of understand, is the site going to deliver my brief, or is there a version of my brief with a few tweaks that it could deliver? Think about, if you're someone who likes to entertain in the back and do lots of gardening, you may not want a north-facing garden. So that may automatically rule out certain plots. Think about privacy, services. So services in terms of, are services available to get to that plot if they aren't already there? Or what are the costs of getting those service connections? Or is it already a service plot, which reduces some of the complexity and cost, but the plot itself may be a little bit more expensive. What are the access requirements for the plot? Can you get out to the plot to develop it? Can big trucks get down in order to deliver materials, stuff? Ecology, if you have a site that has a lot of potential protected species on site, or it is filled with trees with TPOs, it's going to be a bit more challenging. So that's a consideration. And finally, soil and ground conditions. This is the biggest unknown in your new build project. So I would always recommend that early on in the project, you look at a formal site investigation where there's a desktop study of the site and the soil conditions at a minimum. And then if we can also do some borehole testing, that just gives you a lot more information about what kind of foundations you might be looking at. Are you able to do sort of a simple raft slab, or do we have to go down piles, which is a more expensive proposition. Do you need to have a basement? Is this a good site to have a basement on? If it has a lot of flooding or groundwater, probably not a great site for that, or not an inexpensive site to do it. So these are all considerations. These are things that you probably won't have in your brief now until after you get the plot itself, but they are things that can help you review your brief relative to potential plots. Okay, so finally, just talking about how to effectively communicate your vision. So we've talked about all the different things that your brief should include, but we can also provide some additional information. So architects inherently are more visual people. So even if you think you're really, really bad at drawing and sketching, a picture is worth 1,000 words, even a bad picture. I can usually get quite a bit out of it, and potentially more than a list of words for me. So if you're comfortable providing sketches, provide some sketches. If you are more, oriented towards doing things on the computer, you can download SketchUp and have a little play with modeling your own house and what you think it would look like. If you're more of a hands-on person, do a Lego or a physical model. Anything that helps you understand what it is, but also communicates your desires to your design team. And finally, Pinterest boards are great. If you're not familiar with Pinterest, go onto Pinterest, look at it. It's basically an online pin board. So you find images of things, you can save them into a folder with subfolders, and then you can add notes. So I really do encourage you to add notes to these, because you could be, let's say you're looking at this picture right here. I don't know without notes whether you're looking at sort of the landscaped, the hardscaped entry up to the house, and that's a look you really like. I don't know if it's this particular timber that you really like. I don't know if you are drawn to that glass bridge that's connecting two things. So let me know what it is that you like or what it is that you hate. It's actually just as valuable for us to know what you hate as it is for us to know what you love. So having that additional information combined with sort of that single written document is really useful. So I've just put a checklist on. This is all the things that we've already talked about, but as a reminder, make sure you've talked to everyone who's a household member, either current or future. Think about what your future needs are. Think about previous homes, what you loved and hated, how you're going to use the space. Give me a detailed room schedule. So the list of rooms you have to have, but also sizes and qualities of that room. A prioritization of must-haves, nice-to-haves. And as I said, these are things that could potentially change. So go back and revisit those from time to time. What are your energy and or sustainability targets? Think about the budget. We need to know the budget and that you've considered contingency. Site constraints and opportunities are understood. So by the time you're working with your design team, you will have identified a plot. And then whatever visual vision information you have, the drawings, the sketches, the 3D models, the Pinterest boards. So all of this should be written into a single document and then shared with the design team when you're going to get quotes for professional services. So when you're working with your design team, after you've gotten through the sharing the brief with them, you've gotten proposals, you've instructed your design team. This is a relationship that is meant to be collaborative in its best form. It's a collaborative relationship. You're bringing your requirements, your lifestyle needs, and sharing those with us, but we're bringing the design and showing you how you can achieve those wants and desires, also considering your budget. So, the brief really is a way to start. It's something that as an architect we'll look at and we say, okay, well, you're saying you want this on one hand, and you're saying you can afford this. There's some, misalignment there, or, two partners have different ideas of things. Let's try and tease out what it is you're really trying to achieve. We'll talk about those budget checks if, down the road, because this frequently happens. You say, well, I'm only going to do this once, so we might as well do X, Y, Z. As an architect, I should be talking to you about, well, this is the effect it's going to have on the budget. Are you okay with moving forward with that, or do we need to think about it? Really be honest about things. So things that don't work in your house, something that is always a mess in your life and it drives you nuts and you think there's no solution to it. Let's talk about it and see if we can come to a solution about it. And really, commitment is vitally important, to commit to decisions, because every step along the way, the further you get along the design, the more expensive or the more complicated it gets to double back on decisions that have already been made. So mistakes, being vague, once again, not a mind reader. So as much as you can be specific about what you want, about what you like, making sure that there is, although you will have worked together as a household to come up with the brief, let's make sure there's, a point of contact, or if there are 2 points of contact, they're available at every single meeting, so that we're all having the same conversation. And I'm not having one conversation with one person on Tuesday and having a completely contradictory conversation with someone else on Thursday. Hidden budget. So let's be open and transparent about this so we can work with you to get there. Don't think in the short term about what you need now. Think about what you're going to need in the future. Try to ignore change. Try to avoid making significant changes after the design work has started and commitments have been made to certain decisions. Please do think about your energy goals. As I said, not every house has to be a passive house. You just having a warmer environment, a thermally efficient envelope, that can be a huge improvement to you and your way of living in a space. And don't underestimate the costs that you should be holding in contingency. So a higher risk project needs to have a higher contingency. And that contingency, as you move through the design stages, should be able to get lower and lower, because you have more knowns as you get to that. So you start with that clear, really committed brief, and it's going to help you save time, money, and stress. And that is for everyone, the design team members as well as yourself. And when you can commit to those things early, it really does make your build go a lot more smoothly. So just as a quick sort of diagram visual to help you understand, we are starting with that brief, and that can start before any designs. It should start before any design scope happens. But then each step along the way, as things change, the cost of those changes goes up, either in design fees or in actual construction fees. So really, by the end of stage 2, you should be looking at a frozen design, particularly as it relates to the externals of the house, because once you have that planning permission, that is the primary thing that is secured within that planning permission is the look and the size and the massing and materials of the house. You can move things around to a certain extent, the interior after that, but more than likely that's going to have some effect on window sizes or other components. So by the time you get to stages 3, which is building regs, compliance, and stage 4, which is production, you may actually have a kit provider involved who's putting together their set of manufacturing drawings, and they may have already started manufacturing. So we really want details absolutely fixed at that point, and nothing is changing because those costs will incur money, probably both in design fees, professional fees, and in terms of the actual construction cost. So just a quick recap. You can start writing your brief now. So even if you don't have the plot of land, get started, start really creating that clear direction for your build and start to formalize that dream, and document it. Be really, really honest about your budget, commit to your brief, because changes, as we just talked about, do cost money, and prioritize those goals, the must-haves, the nice-to-haves, this would be the absolute dream. And then make sure you hire the right team to help you realize your dream home. So those of you who have heard me talk before about design teams will have heard me say probably that not every architect is right for every project. Not every project is right for every architect. And that is the same with all of your team members. So please do consider that and do your homework and research about your design team, just like you are about your brief and about your plot and about your budget. So thank you very much for your time today. The most important takeaway is to absolutely enjoy the process.
Thanks, Jenny. That was really good. Most of the questions that I wrote down during your presentation, you answered during the presentation, which is a sign of a really good talk. And I think you've similar to that with the people that are watching. So there's not a huge amount of comments and questions have come in, which is a really good sign. I think the only things that I just wanted to sort of double down on was, and again, you picked them up in the end of your summary there, is budget. Has been key with your budget in the first place and making sure that everything is included. And we find that we as a practice are so honest with clients that we miss out on work because we believe the client's budget isn't actually right. And I would urge anybody that if you then decide at that point, well, I'm just going to go to another architect who agrees with my budget, that's completely the wrong thing to do, because everybody can fudge a spreadsheet and make it work and get the answer that you want, but that's not going to be the answer you're going to get at the end. And there's so many projects that we see that the budget's just not right, and we would rather say, well, it needs to be smaller, the specification needs to change, you need to go off and save more, you need to borrow more. But the answer is not to go to somebody that says, yeah, I can do this at £1,500 a square meter. It's just not going to happen anymore.
No, well, and that's where the grand designs problems come in, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's been, sold, come with the dream, sold the dream, but not had it reality checked.
Yeah.
And
it's just going to get worse, right? All the way through that project, that's just going to get worse and worse.
Well, exactly. And it's just going to cause undue stress to everyone. And I'm not a cost expert, but I've seen enough projects go through that I know what the averages are, and I know that you're not developing something for 1,000 a square meter.
Yeah. No, those days, even 1,500, those days are well gone. Yeah. And if the national house builders that are buying 10,000 windows at a time can't do it at that price, then you as a self-builder with no experience are certainly not going to be doing it.
Right.
So, and one thing that I saw recently, actually, and again, it's important to point out and to re-emphasize that we don't expect clients to come up with perfect budgets or perfect briefs, sorry. The fundamental stuff, the bit about you should know that, you should be able to write that down, but it's a good architect's job to get more information out of you. And we tend to do that, Jenny. We get a new inquiry come in, we'll do a free initial consultation. Prior to that, we'll ask for some information to be sent, brief, planning reference if it's got planning, some images, Pinterest boards, but during that half an hour to an hour initial scoping call, we'll really try and help evolve and develop that brief, because a self-builder who's never written a project brief before can't be expected to write the full and final brief.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and it's, as I say, it's a good a job of a good architect to really get all that stuff out of you. And I think the key thing and things that you have raised is tell us what you don't like. There's so many people that if they don't know what they don't like either, that's a difficult thing. So we often do two options completely varied that then we'll say, right, well, actually, I really dislike that. And that can only come sometimes when you see something down on paper or a computer to really understand that. And yeah, I think it was a really good presentation. The one thing that I got recently on a really good client brief that came, and they came to one of the home building shows and said, always listen to you talk. We've written your brief, and then they showed me this brief, and it blew me away. It was so much better, and I'm definitely going to steal some of the ideas from it. But it was an extension conversion project, and they were trying to open up the existing house. So what they did is they'd drawn little sketches, and they started a video holding up to the sketch of the floor plan, and then said, right, and they put it down, and then they were looking at the hallway. And then they walked around and they gave a little visual recording. It was just done on an iPhone. And they spoke about where we were in the room, in the house, the challenges of each room. And then they did a separate video for each room. And then that was linked into the project brief. Really easy to do. Really simple. It wasn't edited. It wasn't seamless and flawless. It was just raw. But if you're doing something like that on an existing dwelling, or even you're on a site, actually coming into the site with the iPhone, walking around, we've got lots of clients that have got drones that can take footage themselves. Yeah. Give us that, right? It's a really good way for us to get something as quick and as early in the process as possible.
And it can be a lot less intimidating as well, because you're not trying to get it perfect. You're just showing and talking, which is what you would be doing if we were out on the site or in your house as well. So it somehow feels like, well, this isn't polished. This is just to give you some ideas and a flavor. And it works really brilliantly.
And it helps open up that communication and that trust and that relationship. And I think you started with that and how important the communication is. And it is the biggest area where things fall down in a project. And we need to get those lines of communication agreed. The cadence, is it WhatsApp? Is it phone? Is it Zoom? Is it in person? And all those things agreed from the outset. And again, that can be part of your brief as well. So yeah, I think that was a really good talk today, and a really good insight into what it is that you need at the very start of your project. So the next things that we have coming up, so we've got our self-build hour, but we've got in-person events coming up, and the next thing that we've got, which we're preparing for at the moment, is the National Home Building and Renovation event at the NEC, where AC Architects and AC Structures are exhibiting at, and we'll be there from the 19th to the 22nd at the NEC, so please come along and visit our stand. We also do self-build seminars, so we get collection of the top experts from finance, architecture, engineering, project managers, cost consultants, all these different things put together. And our next one that we're hosting is at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre in Swindon on the 11th of April. We do limit the amount of spaces that we have at these so that it's a more intimate and private event where we talk to you, but you've got an opportunity where you can raise questions. So we're about 50% booked, but we do have the big exhibition happening next week, so we will get fully booked in that very quickly. So on the 11th of April, you can find out on our website at acarchitects.biz, and then look at the self-build seminar section and book your place. They're free to go to. It's a full day, catered for, and it's a great opportunity to speak to experts. The next self-build hour will be handing back to Jenny for her hosting duties, and it's Mark Goods, who is a planning expert, planning consultant, and he will be talking through about self-build, new build development, dwellings in England, and then the next month we will have one focused solely on Scotland. So I hope you found this month's self-build hour interesting, valuable, and thank you for your time. Thanks for attending. Take care. Bye.